Ever notice how, like, the same meal can totally make you feel awesome one day, and then, like, the next day it leaves you completely wrecked? It's like, what's the deal, you know? Our bodies are seriously strange sometimes.
Yeah, they can be pretty mysterious, that's for sure.
And then imagine that whole unpredictability thing, but, like, with your digestion. And it's, like, way more intense. That's kind of the reality for folks dealing with inflammatory bowel disease or IBD. When it comes to food, it's a whole other level.
It really is fascinating how much food can impact IBD, you know?
Yeah.
We're basically talking about a chronic condition where your immune system, it kind of attacks the digestive tract by mistake.
Mm-hmm.
It causes this like ongoing inflammation. So it's not just, oh, I have a little upset stomach today. It's something that people deal with, you know, day in and day out.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And that's what makes all the stuff you sent over, like, so important to dig into, right? We're really going deep on how diet can play a huge part in managing IBD.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get into like the specifics of what to eat and all that, it's important to note that there are actually two main types of IBD: Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis.
Okay.
So Crohn's it can affect any part of your digestive tract, and the inflammation, it shows up in these like patches.
Interesting.
Ulcerative colitis, on the other hand, it specifically affects the colon and rectum, and the inflammation there is continuous.
So different locations, different patterns of inflammation, but both causing, like, a whole lot of discomfort.
Right.
And speaking of discomfort, like, going through everything you sent over, I had this little light bulb moment. It's not that diet, like, causes IBD.
No, not at all.
Yeah, but it's more that certain foods can be like waving a giant flag that says, hey, IBD, come and make things worse.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Think of it this way. Something like high-fat foods, they take longer to digest, right?
Right.
And that means that food is just kind of like sitting there, moving slowly through your system, and it ends up putting all this extra stress on a digestive system that's already inflamed, already sensitive.
Oh, so it's like working overtime.
Exactly. It's almost like, you know, rubbing sandpaper on a sunburn.
Oh, okay, yeah, I get it. Get into the picture. Not a good time.
Definitely not.
So it's less about, like, making a list of good foods and bad foods and, like, banning
Yeah.
everything, right?
Right.
It's more about figuring out how specific foods they interact with your individual gut, which is already dealing with a lot.
You got it. And that's where the real detective work starts. Because what might be a trigger food for one person with IBD could be totally fine for someone else.
It's so personal.
Yeah. This isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It's all about figuring out what works for you.
It's like a puzzle.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we, like, actually become these IBD food detectives? Where do we even start figuring out what our own triggers are?
Well, one of the most helpful tools is actually super simple: a food diary.
A food diary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about just like, you know, writing down had a salad and calling it a day.
Right.
This is where we've got to get like seriously detailed.
Oh, so it's like full-on detective mode.
Exactly. We're talking dates, times,
Yeah.
the whole 9 yards. Like, what did you eat? How was it made? When did you eat it? And here's the most important part. Did any symptoms show up after you ate it?
Oh, right.
And if so, was it just a little bit of discomfort, or was it like a major flare-up?
So you can, like, connect the dots.
Exactly. You can start to see those patterns between certain foods and how your body reacts.
That's super smart. Okay, so it's not just what you ate, but, like, the whole story around it.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But so then what? Let's say you've got your food diary, you're, like, diligently writing everything down. What do you actually do with all that info?
That's where the elimination diet comes in.
The elimination diet.
Yeah, and before you start picturing yourself, you know, just eating rice cakes and celery sticks for every meal.
Right, because that doesn't sound very fun or, like, livable.
Exactly. It's not about deprivation at all. It's really about working with, ideally, a registered dietitian
Right.
to strategically, like, take out certain food groups, things that tend to be common culprits for IBD flare-ups. We're talking about dairy, gluten, spicy foods, even caffeine sometimes. And then you slowly start to add those foods back in one at a time and really paying attention to how you feel as you do it.
So it's like narrowing down the suspects, right? Like, who's causing the trouble here?
Exactly. It's all about pinpointing those trigger foods.
And you said working with a registered dietitian for this part is, like, really key, right?
It makes a huge difference because they can help you design a plan that's both safe and like actually effective for you. But also they're going to make sure that you're still getting all the nutrients you need even while you're eliminating certain things.
Oh, that's a really good point. I was just thinking, like, what if you cut out a food group and then accidentally, you end up being low in some important vitamin or mineral?
Exactly. That's a real risk if you try to do it on your own.
Right.
And that's why, I can't emphasize enough how important that professional guidance is.
Yeah.
A registered dietitian can kind of help you navigate all those potential issues and make adjustments along the way so you're not missing out on anything.
That's really reassuring to know, actually. It's amazing how much goes into, like, personalizing this whole journey. It
Yeah.
feels a lot less like guesswork and a lot more, well, like you're saying, like science.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's what's so exciting about it.
Yeah.
We're moving away from this like one size fits all approach to IBD and really like zeroing in on what works for each individual person. It's all about taking back control.
It's like having, one of those personalized maps, but it's not just for, like, navigating the grocery store aisles. It's like for your own body.
Exactly. It's about, like you said, taking back that sense of control, which can be huge when you're living with, a chronic condition like IBD.
Totally. And speaking of, feeling empowered and in control, something that really hit home for me going through all this info you sent was how much it talked about quality of life. It's not just about, like, the physical stuff, right?
Right. It goes way beyond that. IBD, it can really impact your whole life. You're dealing with this constant exhaustion from, your body fighting inflammation all the time. And then there's the anxiety of like, is today the day I have a flare up? It's always there. And even like socially, it can be tough.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine having to like plan every outing around, where the restrooms are. That's a reality for a lot of people with IBD.
It's so real. And, it's easy to get caught up in, like, the day-to-day of managing it all.
Yeah.
The doctor's appointments, what you can and can't eat. But it's so important to remember that mental and emotional piece of it, too.
It's huge. And I'm really glad you're bringing that up. It's about recognizing that, true well-being, it's not just about the food on your plate. It's about taking care of your mind and spirit, too.
So true. So as we wrap up this deep dive into, like, the world of IBD and all things food, what's, like, the big takeaway you want to leave our listeners with today?
Well, you've got a really solid understanding now of how food and IBD, they're connected, it's complex, but you've got this.
Yes.
You've got the tools to be your own food detective, to work with a registered dietitian, to figure out a plan that's perfect for you, and to advocate for yourself and what you need to thrive. And remember, knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
But the real magic happens when you use that knowledge to take care of yourself, the whole you, body, mind, and spirit.
It's about tuning in, listening to your body, respecting what it's telling you, and, celebrating how resilient it is. It's about finding what works for you one delicious, gut-friendly meal at a time. And that's a wrap on this deep dive, everybody.